right, what I wanted to go over today is how to stage a model using a wireframe material. Okay, so a lot of times what we're wanting to do after we've built a model is we want to show it with a gray shader to show the shape of it, but then we also want to be able to show it with a wireframe so we can show how our polygons are arranged. So I'm just going to show you a couple of ways to approach this, and what I've got here is just a simple setup. So I've just got a simple little sphere widget, and then I've got a ground plane, and then I've got a few lights. So I've got basically a 3-point light, top light, light off to the left, and a light off to the right. Okay, these are area lights. These are Maya's area lights. And they're set up. I'll just show you real quick. Let's get this frame back in. Okay, so F3 to smooth it. And then all I'm doing here is, let's turn these lights off one at a time. So all right, so I've got a top light. Okay, and I'm not using a color temperature for this. You can, but this throws a little bit of a pink in it, which if I was doing this for a room, I might do this, but I want it to just stay neutral white. So I'm not going to use a color temperature on my main light from the top. And then, let's see, let's turn that one off. Then off to the left, I have a warm light. So here I am using color temperature. I've got this set to 5200, which is a warm light. Okay, I can turn that one off. Then I have a light over on the right. And that one's I'm using a color temperature of around 8000 to give it kind of a blue cast. So if I turn all of those back on, that's going to give me my light for the scene. Okay, now to do a wireframe, all you have to do is come in here and just search for wire, and there's a wireframe material, and then I can apply that to my object, and then I've got a wireframe material on here. Now, a thing to note is that this material is going to show wire based on the subdivisions that are on it, which is a problem, because what I really want is to show a base wireframe of what I actually sculpted, but I want it to be smooth. So this runs into a problem with this technique. Now, when you first put this on here, it's going to default to triangles, and you're going to want to change this to polygons, so it's showing us quads. But an issue that we run into, and I can increase the width of it, of the wire, to bring it out a little bit more. But the problem is I want to show this. This is my base mesh. But I want to show it subdivided. but I don't want the subdivision wire. I want the wire of where it's not subdivided, but I want the smoothness of it subdivided. That's a problem. Now another thing is I've just got a simple plane down here, so I'm not doing anything like a cyc wall or anything, but there's a way that you can kind of do this and have it so that we don't have to really do a cyc wall. So what you can do here is if you go up to your render settings, and I go into environment, what I can do is I can control this background color by going here in this background, and I'm going to click right here to add, and I want to add a ray switch shader. When you do that, it'll pop in over here, okay, and it's here too. So the camera is the background color. So as I lighten this up, it's going to lighten up the background. Now another little trick is to get it so that I can't see the edge of this plane, okay. Now a trick to do that is to apply a shader to that. And what we want to get is we want to get an AI shadow map. Okay, the shadow map, basically what this has done, it's mostly used for compositing, but what it does is it puts it allows us to put a material, a shader on something, and it's going to project from the view of the camera, and it projects the background on. So whatever I have in the background, it's going to project it onto the ground, but since it's the same color as the background, then we won't be able to see it, but we can see a shadow. So it's basically almost like you could think of it as just turning it transparent. So when I pick it and I apply this to it, it's going to turn it the same color as the background, and we're only going to see a shadow underneath it. Now, you can see there's a little edge right here, and that's just because the shadow is hitting the edge right there. So what we want to do on that is we want to just scale that out till it's far enough out that we don't see the edge where the shadow is hitting it, and it'll just become transparent. So now this will look like that this is sitting on a ground plane and the color is gray, and I can control that color here. I mean, you know, I can make it whatever color I want it. Now, we don't want bright colors. I see people do this all the time. No, we don't want to focus on the background. We want to focus on our object. So this should be, you know, some kind of a neutral gray. And we can just determine how bright we want it. Okay, another thing that I see happen a lot is when people are, and let's go back to one subdivision, that this seems to not have any volume to it. Okay, it's just like flat shaded, and we don't really want it flat shaded like that. We want it to be like a gray shader. Well, a little trick in doing that is to take your, get this in here, get your wireframe, and then what we're going to do is make this window a little smaller. we're going to do another search, and what we want is an ambient occlusion. So what I want is an ambient occlusion shader. So now if I apply this ambient occlusion shader to our object, then it's going to give it some volume. Not do that. And what we can do is, let's just go ahead and smooth this. So it's got some volume. So what you want to do is to apply your wireframe to it. And then what you want to do is to plug this ambient occlusion into your filter color. So then what it's going to do is to fill it, that white area, with the ambient occlusion, and then lay the wire over the top of it. Like so. So that's a pretty decent way to show a wireframe on a surface, so you get a shadow underneath it there. However, to me, this is limited because, you know, it's funny that Maya does it this way because, well, I guess, you know, Max, 3ds Max has an advantage over Maya in this respect, in that 3ds Max has a modifier stack, so you can set things in different places on a modifier stack, so you can actually have the wireframe applied and then subdivide after it. And you can't really directly do that in Maya, okay? I mean, you kind of can, but you can't. So I can sit here and tell it, okay, well, don't subdivide it here, but subdivide it at the moment of render. And to do that, you pick your object. So we pick it. And then over here on its shape tab, you can go down to Arnold, open up Arnold. And then you can go down to the subdivision right here. And by default, it's none. And then you can change this to Cat Clark. And then what you're telling it to do is to display. It's still, you know, low poly, but when it renders high poly. And of course, you can tell it how many divisions you want in here. Usually something like 2 is fine. If I go 1. So, but this is still the same problem because I'm not getting the wireframe back at this, okay, unless I turn this to 0, and now it is, but now it's not smooth anymore. So that's an issue. So I'm going to show you a different way to apply wireframe material to this, not using the wireframe. Okay, so not using this AI wireframe. I'm going to show you a different way. Okay, so let's just apply just a gray shader back to this now. And I'm going to turn this back off. And then back to 3 to shade it, and now we're just back to a gray shader on it. Okay. So I just put a regular AI standard surface onto it. Okay, so let's build a different shader. Let's build a new tab here. So what we're going to do to build this material, okay, this shader, is we're going to get a toon shader. So we're going to get an AI toon shader. And then we're going to need another one, and we're going to get a utility shader. All right, so now to create this on this utility, okay, we're going to want to change these parameters over here. Okay, we want to change the shade mode to flat, and then we're going to want to change the color mode uniform ID. Yeah, there we go, to uniform ID. All right, so flat is the shade mode, color mode is uniform ID. Now what we want to do is to plug this into the toon shader. So you're going to go out here and you're going to plug it in right here. Now it's going to give me options here, and I want to go to other, and then it's going to bring me up different places I can plug these into, and what I want to do is plug it into mask color. Okay, so I'm going to pick that, pick our object, and then I'm going to apply this to it. Okay. So now another thing that I need to make sure I do is in my render settings, I need to make sure that I turn this on to, by default, it's on Gaussian. So it'll throw people off. So as soon as they apply the material, they'll go, well, I'm not seeing a wireframe. So what you have to do is in your Arnold tab under your render settings, go down here to filter and change this from Gaussian. Okay. And you're going to change it to contour, and then it's going to give you that. All right. So now what I'm going to do is switch this back to not subdivided. So now that's the wire that I want. And by the way, on your toon shader, this is the edge color. You know, it'll be the color of the wireframe that's on there. We want it black. There are times where we may reverse it out, where we want a white shader with a black shader with a wireframe. But for the most part, you want a gray shader here. And then your width is set in two places. How I proceed is when we turn this contour on, I like to have this set at 2. Gives me a good strong wireframe as a basis. Then in my material, I can set, if it's too heavy, then I can go here with my scale and I can start turning this down a little bit here to make it a little bit thinner. Okay, but you have to watch it because you can get to a state that you get it so thin and it starts turning kind of grayish. Okay. Now another thing that what I noticed happens quite a bit is, matter of fact, let's go, and so now on my object, okay, on my object, I'm going to go in here to my subdivision that we talked about earlier. Okay, Cat Clark, and then I can do a subdivision of 1 or 2. I'm going to go 2, and so now it's smooth, but my wireframe is still the base wireframe. I also notice sometimes this gets a little dark down here for me. And so on our material that we're applying to it, this Toon Shader, you can go down into this Advanced tab down here, and you've got an indirect diffuse. And if you turn that up just a little bit, it'll add a little bit of brightness to the bottom of this so it doesn't turn so dark. You can see that when it's all the way to 0, it can get really dark in there. You can't go too far because it'll kind of wash it out and seem like it's glowing. Okay, but what we want to do is just adjust it enough that this is not so dark. Maybe something like about that. Okay, another thing that so there, now I've solved my problem. I'm leaving it at, you got to make sure you leave this at your subdivision, because if I take this and I go ahead and I hit F3 to subdivide it, then it's going to be subdividing it here too. So we want to make sure in our viewport we want it on 1, not subdivided, and we're telling it to subdivide it when it renders, and then I'll get this nice look. Another thing I wanted to cover is the rendering quality, because a lot of people don't understand how to control their render quality. So let's talk about that. So in Arnold, up here you have settings, and this is render quality settings. Now here's the thing. The higher you make these numbers, the higher the quality, the longer it takes to render. Now, this camera, by coming in here and kicking this up, it's going to increase the quality, but what this is a multiplier of all of these. And I'm not using any subsurface scattering. I'm not using any transmission. Okay, so I don't necessarily need any of these to be higher. So instead of setting this, the main thing I have here is the diffuse. I need the diffuse to be a higher quality. So if you just come in here and set this up higher, say 4, then that's going to give me a higher quality rendering. I don't really have much specular in here, but a little bit. So I may kick that up to 3, and then that's going to make a higher quality render. Now, the shadow, okay, this somewhat, but is not directly affecting the shadow. The quality of the shadow is set by the lights, not the render settings. So you'll see, and I see this in a lot of people's stuff, that their shadows are very grainy. Okay, so we're going to fix that. So I'm going to start with my top light here, go into my Arnold tab, and samples is the quality of this. So let's kick it up to say 4. This is going to make it take longer to render also, but it's going to give me a better render, and I'm going to do it for all 3 of my lights. I'm going to turn those up to 4. And now that's going to give me a good quality in my shadow. You'll see it's taking longer to render. But then I'm going to have a nice smooth shadow and not a grainy shadow. Okay, so the 3 things that I've shown you is you can use a wireframe, an Arnold wireframe, but you want to put an ambient occlusion in the color, which will give your object volume, and it won't just seem like it's just white. However, that's going to show you the wire at the subdivision level, and that's not really what we want to show a client, because that's not our true polygons. We want to show our true polygons. So by using this Toon Shader method, then I'm able to show my underlying structure that I modeled, but see it smooth like our final shape would be. Then the other thing that I showed you was how to make a plane and put a AI matte shadow on it, which will make it basically transparent, where it's not really transparent. What it's doing is projecting the background color on it, but we'll only see the shadow. And then I showed you how to change the background color that we can adjust to whatever we want, and now it'll seem like, you know, a solid gray background with a shadow underneath it, and we can make a really nice presentation. So hopefully that has helped you, and you'll be able to create some nice renders of your models with a nice wireframe to show your potential employers how you organize your polygons. All right. Hopefully that helped you. Thank you very much.